Hello YouTube, in this video I'm going to be making an alien turtleoid figure from a movie called LASERBLAST. I'm starting in the same way that I usually do with small figures, which is just to make a wire armature. So I've got this piece of board, drilled 2 holes in it, just using this, and then I've just put some 2mm aluminium wire through. The aluminium wire is really soft, really easy to use, and then you just make this kind of framework, twist it around itself, and I also super glued it in place. The tortoise-like aliens in this movie are amazing and they're really well designed. The stop motion animation as well is also great, and it reminds me of the work of Ray Harryhausen. The actual movie itself is a bit of an acquired taste, and it's one of those movies that maybe is so bad that it's good. The acting's not particularly great, but I just love those kind of old movies anyway. You can see here on my wire armature where I basically just put one wire up to start with on each leg and then twisted the wire around it. Same with the body, same with the arms. One single wire initially and then another wire wrapped around. And you can do that as many times as you want to kind of build it up and strengthen it. Obviously those wire cutters are particularly useful, and a little thin pair of pliers is good as well. You can see there I've built it up on the head a little bit wider to make where the jaw's going to be, and just to give me a rough kind of head shape. Understandably, my wife is always asking me to make smaller figures if possible, and this one I decided to make really quite small. Obviously, if I'd have made this maybe 2 or 3 times the height, I could have got a lot more detail into it, but I'm just trying to kind of cram as much detail into a small figure as possible. So the head was the main thing that I wanted to get right and make it as tortoise-like as possible. I had quite a lot of reference material, just images that I'd taken off the internet, some from the movie and some from a plastic figure that was released at the time. A lot of the process here just involves blocking out sort of solid areas. I'm using MILLIPUT, which is a 2-part putty. You can see I've used it for the neck as well, and again just bulked that out and then added these kind of tendons and things going down the edges. I've got more to add later, but this is a sort of good starting point. Shows up some of his kind of wrinkles. Obviously, these alien figures, because they're based on tortoises, they look like kind of little old men type thing in a way. These are the main tools that I'm going to be using. 3 fine ball styluses and this plastic tool with a bladed kind of end to it. Here's the Milliput. If you haven't used Milliput before, it's a 2-part putty. You mix the 2 parts together in equal amounts and it sets rock hard at room temperature in about 4 hours. That obviously doesn't mean that you have to make the whole figure in 4 hours. It means that you can do a head and neck like I've just done here, and if that sets, you can then add arms or whatever, let that set, and then you can add the body. Just work in different stages, keep adding further and further detail to it as you go along. You can see here I bulked it all out. This was actually really quick to do, and then all of the detail stuff will come over the top of this. Whenever you're making a figure, it's worth having reference of the figure from all different kind of angles. So this one I had like a front view, a back view, a couple of side views, and it really helped overall. I wanted to make sure that his feet and his legs were going to be really solid and that he wouldn't kind of snap off the board. So I added this kind of grassy texture at the bottom, and you can see that I've actually molded that right up into the legs while that was all nice and soft. Then I started working on the sort of abdomen area of the creature. You can see it's very kind of ant-like almost in a way, but you've got all these kind of scales or sections, and then each of those was kind of put on one at a time, and then I pressed in where all of the little lines and ridges are. I can sometimes be a bit lazy when it comes to the backs of my sculpts, and that's because normally they're viewed from the front and you don't see the back, so I kind of work on the front quite often first and then do the back at the end and don't put as much effort into the back. So I thought with this one I'll do the back first, and then I'm more likely to get it more consistently good all over. So here I've been working on the front, did the feet, made the claws and everything, and then put those kind of circular bits around them, all the rings going up the legs. Then I've got all this detail in the front. each of the main sections on the front of him, I did the lower one first, then the one above that, then the one above that, and that helped kind of get them all in place, and that worked really quite well. It's worth paying attention to all the little details like veins or tendons or kind of muscle shapes on the legs, that kind of thing. Just because when you come to paint it, all of those are going to be emphasized and they're going to really show up when you're doing kind of dry brushing to bring out all of the higher, lighter areas. If you're ever adding a bump like this one on his back, just make a small ball, squash it on, and then you're just using a ball stylus to kind of smooth the edges in, and that gives you that nice kind of bump effect. I did think about just having him in this position with his arms out, because that's the position that the figure was in, the plastic figure that was released at the time. But then I thought I'd quite like to have him like he is in the movie with a laser gun in his hand. So I thought I'd make the laser gun separately and then bend his arm differently. I did think about building the gun from scratch just using MILLIPUT, but then I thought I'd go and find a whole load of little plastic bits and bobs and nails and things like that, and then just super glue it all together. This was the end result. I did use a bit of MILLIPUT to kind of smooth in and also to join some of the bits together, but mainly it was super glued. Here you can see where I've built the first arm. So I got the main kind of shape on first and then added the rings over the top separately, like I did with the legs. This other arm, I've had to snap it in the middle where the elbow is, and luckily because it had the wire inside, that held it all together. And then I'm going to build his hand over the top of this gun so it wraps around the gun. So here with the arms, it's just important to try and get the proportions of the hand and everything the same on the other side, and then to also get the claws to squash around the gun so it looks like he's actually holding it. At this point there's an end in sight and I start to get excited like I normally do, because I'm looking forward to the painting stage, which is the bit that I really enjoy the most. It's the time where everything comes together and he starts to look exactly like you want to, like he does in the movie. Let's show you what I did with this hand that wraps around the gun. I was quite pleased because I managed to get two claws on one side and then the sort of the thumb claw coming in on the other side, and that seems to have worked quite well. It really looks like he's gripping it nicely. I also managed to match the length of the arm sections and each finger and also each claw. So I was really pleased with that because that's something that I was worried about initially. Now this standard MILLIPUT is a really great colour because it's so kind of light that it shows up all the details really nicely. So the only problem with the first painting stage is that I tend to like to put all my really dark colours on first. So initially I'll paint it like really dark brown and black as well. And that has an effect where it kind of kills the effect of all the bumps showing up. Because if you think about it, everything looks dark, so everything just kind of disappears into each other. So when you see this in a minute, it's going to look basically like almost like a silhouette, and then gradually you bring back all of the lighter and lighter colours until you're just kind of dry brushing the lightest colours over the top. I'll talk to you more about that in a second, but you just have to go through this process where all of your details are kind of lost for a while, and you just have to sort of put up with it. Unfortunately, it's quite a hard thing to do, to paint over all the really nice details so they initially disappear, but then it's the later stages where you're lightening it up that everything comes back again and you become pleased with it. Okay, you ready? Here comes the first painting stage. So you can see I've done his head and his body and his legs in this really dark brown. Hopefully you can pick up that that's dark brown and not black. It is pretty dark. And then I've done his gloves black, and I've done his boots black, and all of the base black as well. I'm going to be painting his gloves silver and his boots silver. His little gun will be gold. And it's a really good idea if you're ever painting anything metallic to give it a black base coat first. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but painting it black really makes all of the metallic colour kind of pop later on. I really like doing this. Right, I just use System 3 acrylic paints to do all my painting on this, and If anything, at this stage, you want to be making your paint just slightly wetter. So add a tiny bit of water in with it, just so it flows a bit better, because that means that when you're painting dark colours, they really kind of soak down into all of those little deep gaps and things, because you want this to get right in there. Then, here we go. When you're doing your dry brushing to get to this finish stage, you just gradually put a lighter colour on and you dust it over the top. So the dry brushing technique, you have your paint colour on your brush, and I use a really quite rubbish old brush that's a bit frayed, and then you rub it on a bit of kitchen paper until it's almost dry, and then you're just literally dusting hardly any paint over the top, and it gets on all of those high places, but it leaves all of the low places nice and dark. So it may look on your screen like I've just done one colour, like a sort of a yellow ochre type colour, but actually I did a couple of colours. So I did a reddish brown first, so that was a mix of yellow ochre, a bit of red, and a bit of a dark green, just to make it a little bit darker. And then, yeah, the yellow ochre's dusted on the top of that. You can see here where I've dry brushed silver onto the gloves and gold onto the gun. So you're just being, again, very careful, have it almost dry and just dust it over the top. So you can leave black, like in all the ridges between, those rings on the gloves and in the deep places in the gun. That can all stay black. So that makes it actually a lot easier to paint. Remember, the gun was just made out of mainly like little plastic and rubber pieces, and now actually it looks like it's made out of metal. That's the cool thing when you dry brush with silver or gold paint onto black. You can really make it look like a metal object if you're lucky. With the base, I just used some sap green, and I just literally dry brushed it over the textured bit that I'd made for the base, so it looks a bit sort of like moss. And then I've just kind of dappled it just by literally, almost sponging it on really, but just with a dry brush again, just dab, 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 dab over till you get that sort of textured build up, and that seemed to work pretty good as well. So I'm pretty pleased with how this one's turned out. In a dream world, I would have made him like 3 times taller, and I could have got much more detail in, but I think I've got a reasonable amount in. It's enough to show what the character looks like, and because he's not a very well-known creature either, in amongst all my other creatures that I've made from movies, I tend to make the ones that are really well-known bigger, and then they're more eye-catching. People see them first, and then they see these smaller figures that they're not as aware of, if at all. And that seems to work quite well. If you do watch the movie LASERBLAST, don't say I didn't warn you. It looks pretty low budget, but actually, this bit, just the animation scene with the turtloids makes it all worthwhile. I just really love movies from like the 70s and the 80s just because they kind of have a nostalgic quality for me. And I often forgive a movie if it's quite bad overall. If it does have a good creature in it, I sort of forgive it for being a bit rubbish. Let me know in the comments if you've seen LASERBLAST already, and particularly if you're a bit of a fan of it. Or let me know if you watch it because of this video. Let me know what you think. A massive thanks to MILLIPUT for sponsoring this channel. Try some if you haven't already, it really is a great product. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Check out my other videos that I've made of other movie creatures, and hit subscribe to see anything that I post up in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.